Hey guys, welcome back. Today we're going to work on Abraham's 98 Prelude. Last week I installed the new shocks and springs, plus the new brake lines, the pads and rotors. This week we're going to take care of some other suspension issues that are getting worn out and probably need to be replaced. We're going to work on the two lower ball joints. We're also going to put on this upper camber ball joint. We're going to change out both of the lower control arm bushings, new wheel bearing, brand new hub, and we're just throwing an axle on because both the axles had been falling apart. A couple of tools that I find necessary to complete this job. I use an electric impact. This is to get the new bearing and the new hub seated back into the knuckle. I'm using this threaded stock with a handful of washers. You can see I have used it pretty extensively on a bunch of different wheel bearing and hub assemblies. Of course, the nuts on there to lock it. Using this larger socket, this is to knock the old wheel bearing out. Got a 5-pound hammer, and you need a ball joint separator tool. This one I normally use on all of my EFs. It's a 3/4. It's not big enough for the Prelude. The Prelude ball joints are larger, so this is also from Harbor Freight. This one's a lot easier. You just slide it in, use the hammer to knock the ball joints loose. Some of you have probably seen these parts before. These are from Harbor Freight, made by Maddox. The front wheel bearing adapters, also the ball joint service kit. Service kit you can rent if you don't have a press. I always use my press to get ball joints out. That makes it a lot easier, at least for the uppers. The lowers, I just use the large hammer. It makes it very easy. The front wheel bearing adapters, I've seen them used before. I've seen videos. I didn't find it necessary to spend $100 with that 20% off coupon. It would be like $96. I didn't find it necessary to use those, as I actually started learning how to do wheel bearings with the threaded stock and the impact gun long before I'd even seen this kit. So those are something that could help you out immensely if you decide you want to spend the money on those, and you'll be doing plenty in the future. But I feel like my electric impact, threaded stock, I don't even know, probably 10-15 bucks I spent on it. Electric impact is great, especially when knocking off lug nuts. If you want to ever take those off, a really quick job. And I've used that thing quite a bit. As you can tell how dirty and worn out it's gotten. My handle's super dirty. So, and that was only like a $35 electric impact. Very much well worth it. Enough of the talking, let's get started on the front wheels. To change all those parts, we're going to remove the entire knuckle along with the upper control arm. We're going to start by removing the 36mm wheel spindle nut. Next, we need to get the brake caliper off of the knuckle. Behind it, on the top and bottom, you'll find two 17mm bolts. Go ahead and remove both of those. With the caliper bolts removed and the caliper still resting on the knuckle, go ahead and remove the 12mm bolt which holds the brake line to the knuckle. Now the caliper's free, brake line's also free. Let's go ahead and remove it. And I put a bucket under here just so I can lay it on top of there while I work on everything else, and we're not putting any stress on the brake line. Go ahead and remove the 12mm bolt which holds the brake line bracket to the knuckle. We need to remove that so we can get to these two 10mm bolts which hold the ABS line to the knuckle. So remove the 12, then remove the 10 and the second 10. Then remove the two 10mm bolts which hold the ABS sensor to the knuckle. Next we have to remove the shock assembly and the fork. Remove the 14mm bolt at the top of the fork, and then also the 17mm bolt and nut at the bottom of the fork. Get the fork off of the shock. Remove the three 14mm nuts at the top of the shock and pull the shock assembly away from the car. I know it's a little dark to see in here, but we had to remove the shock because we're going to remove the whole upper control arm. That way we can get this ball joint changed out. There's two 14mm bolts that we're going to back out. And I just wanted to show you that now. We're going to remove the lower ball joints first, and then this will be the last thing that we remove to get the whole knuckle assembly taken out. First, let's get the tie rod removed. Go ahead and remove the cotter pin, and you may have a 14mm, you may have a 17mm. I think it depends on the tie rod that was used. Mine looks like a 17mm, but get that bolt, get that nut removed. And at the bottom, you're going to see the two ball joint configuration. Remove the cotter pins and
Depending on what size these are, go ahead and get both of those nuts removed.
After you have all three of the nuts removed, let's get the ball joint separator out and your BFH, and let's get those removed. With the ball joints released, now you can remove this 14mm nut. This is on the sway bar end link. It connects the end link to the lower control arm. There also is, it has a spot for an Allen head wrench. If you need to put that in there to stop it from spinning, you may have to do that, but a lot of times it will just break free when you take the 14mm nut off. With the nut removed, just wiggle the sway bar up and down. There you go, and it'll slide right out. Now at the top of the control arm, go ahead and remove both of the 14mm bolts. Now with the top two bolts removed, you can get it pulled free. Same time, we want to push in the end of the CV axle. Let's get it removed. And now we want to lift and pull it away. And then get the 17mm bolt so we can get the control arm off of the car. Let me show you this. This is a good indication that this LCA needs to be replaced. That inner bushing is completely destroyed. I'm gonna get the brake rotor removed next. These look like they're already loose. I didn't put them on super tight knowing I was gonna be doing this work anyway. Remove the nut for the upper control arm and get the upper control arm separated from the knuckle. This upper control arm doesn't have a snap ring on the ball joint. So all we're going to do is just get it pressed out. I'm going to go ahead and remove the rubber boot retaining ring. It makes it easier to put a socket on here and just press it out. This ball joint is relatively loose too, so it was definitely time to change this one. Now using a socket that's large enough to get to catch the ball joint as you press it through, and a socket that's small enough to press on it. Let's go ahead and get this pressed out. In case you're curious, I'm using a 12-ton press. Now the upper control arm is ready for that ball joint. This one, you don't have to press in. It just kind of fits into place. It has this ring here, which slides right onto the ring on the upper control arm. And then you can just put the washer and then tighten up the nut. We will let the alignment guy worry about adjusting the camber / toe / everything when we take it to him so he can get it set to spec. So depending on what you're working with, go ahead and get it reinstalled, and we'll move on to the lower control arm next. Now here's a look at that lower control arm. Here's that front bushing, which is pretty much destroyed. Looks like it's even pushing out a little bit. This one is in much better shape. But regardless, we're still going to change both of these today. It almost looks like this one is oblong now. Jeez, I don't know if... We're going to try to press it out regardless. Maybe you guys can see it. It kind of looks like it's ovaled, like it sticks up further over here. Or is it just me? No, it looks like it. You can see it on this side. So we're going to try to press this bushing out, and I'm going to measure it up to the other one first before I do that. Now I'm hoping to have a socket that'll work to get the center one pushed out, or at least started. Otherwise I need to run to the store and grab one that'll fit. Okay, that one worked partially, but it's too big now, it looks like. So I got it pressed out a little bit. I'm gonna try a smaller socket and see if I can get it pressed out the remainder of the way. I'm gonna try this 27 with a little washer in there. That worked. So I started with a 30, which mine is grind down. I did that so it made it easy for me to find. Is it bottoming out? Oh, I need more length now. Well, regardless, you get the idea. Go ahead and get that one pressed out, and then get the opposite one pressed out. And I'm going to show you how to press the other one in. It's a lot easier than getting these pressed out. Now, using a combination of different sockets, I'm using the arbor plates on the bottom. I'm just trying to get it started, since this one looked like it was a little offbeat, just perfectly round. Perfect. That's all we needed to do. Now I'm not going to be able to push it all the way through because it is flat, obviously. So now I'm just going to get this in there and finish it off. And there it is, we got the bushing pressed in. Looks good on both sides. You can see it kind of fit to shape, even though it's a little oval. It'll work perfect. Repeat the same process for the opposite side. Now we're gonna work on getting the hub out. I'm using a 27mm socket and just my hammer. We're just gonna hammer on that a handful of times until the hub slides straight out. Okay, we're gonna hammer on that twice until the hub slides straight out. Now you need to get the snap ring removed, which is on the inner side of the knuckle holding onto the bearing. Maybe a set of snap ring pliers. Looks like I bent mine last time. Luckily I have a handful. Some screwdrivers once you get it in, maybe to pop it out, but you do need to get this ring removed next. Once you have the snap ring removed, go ahead and get it set up. I always like to use a combination of some 4x4s or 2x4s if I have whatever I have laying around. I'm using this larger, this is a 1 3/4 inch socket, and we're going to use the 5-pound hammer. We're going to hit this out now. Now whenever you're using a hammer, make sure you're always wearing some impact resistant goggles or glasses, because you never know, like using the hammer and hitting this piece of metal, a small piece might shoot off. The last thing you want to do is have it hit you in the eye, so make sure you're protecting yourself while you're doing this. But go ahead and hammer away at this and you'll slowly get the bearing pressed out. And there it is. Bearing removed. Kind of makes a mess. It's really not that difficult though. So wood gets torn up. I've gone through plenty of wooden blocks. You can always get another one. Very inexpensive. Not a difficult way of getting it out. I hit it probably about 10 times. I just sped up the process so you could see it. Now we're going to change out the 2 lower ball joints. Both boots are torn. There are no snap rings, so what's a good alternative when you don't use the actual snap rings? Let's put spot welds on there. Ugh. Whoever touched this car and did that shouldn't be allowed around vehicles. You're not going to use a damn snap ring on the lower ball joint, then I don't know what in the hell they're doing. So I'm going to grind these down real quick because those aren't supposed to be there. The new lower ball joints came with snap rings, so we're going to put those on. But let me get those taken care of and then I'll get those pushed out. Now I'm assuming that these are maybe just going to slide right out once I get these removed. If not, I am going to take a hammer and just hit them from this side and knock them out. Okay, so my grinder made quick work of those. Now look, this one's just loose. They tried to put a spot weld over there, but they didn't even get it attached. So this one, I'll be able to hammer out. Let me check this other one. Let me do it right here real quickly. That one's pretty much out. It's just the rubber that's catching it. This one actually is pressed in. You can see and I can feel it. So let me just get these boots pulled off real quick because I want to just shoot both of these through. Okay, with the boots off, let's just... There we go. Fortunately, I nicked the surface a little bit. It's not going to be detrimental to it at all. There's still the full lip where the ball joints sit, so it'll be perfectly fine. But we can avoid putting some spot welds that don't even hold. Now when putting the new ball joints in, this rear one, it just slides in. Then we need the snap ring. This one, it was the tighter one. We're gonna have to hit that one. What I will do first, I like to remove, let me clean off my little pick. I like to remove the dust covers, the grease covers. That way you don't damage it and putting the C-clips on, because they can be a little tricky sometimes. So we're gonna get this just slid up. You're gonna put it back on in the reverse order that we're doing this. I'm gonna show you exactly why. Remove the nut. And then try to keep this as clean as possible. We're gonna lay the boot aside. We're gonna push this one in. Now, we need to get the C-clip on. C-clip, snap ring, whatever you wanna call them. Same function. Once you get that clip back on, go ahead and feed the boot back on. And then put the retaining ring on the rubber boot. And for the second ball joint, go ahead and get it in. I'm gonna hammer it back into position. And then I'm gonna remove the dust cover, remove the retaining ring, and then I'm gonna put on the C-clip, put the dust boot back on, put the ring back on, and we're done with the ball joints. Okay, now that the ball joints are done, we're gonna work on getting the bearing pressed in. First thing you wanna do is get your stock ready. You're gonna remove all these washers. Now on the reverse side, we're obviously gonna need one that stops it. So let me take two of these larger ones. I'll take these three. We'll go with the small one, middle size, large. That's enough to stop it on the rear. And on the front side, we're gonna try lining it up. That looks pretty straight. We're just gonna give that a go. And two that'll fit. Maybe this one. It's actually better. I'm gonna use those three on this side. Okay, and if you feel you're confident, you got it straight, go and get your wrench on the reverse side to lock it into place. Let's see if this is lined up straight. I'm not gonna lie, it doesn't always happen on the first try. I like to make sure the stock is centered as much as possible. Don't know if that is. No luck on the first one. Okay, this is attempt number 2. First time didn't work. Well, I got it in. Let me just back this nut out. We did it a little too far. Okay, I backed it out. Push the stock in a little further. That's it. There we go. It is pressed in all the way to the end. Go ahead and get your snap ring pressed back in, and then we're going to repeat the same procedure with the hub. Okay, now we're going to get the hub installed. Now, when using the rear ones, we don't want anything larger than the bearing itself. Because if you do it larger, once this hub goes through, it's going to push on this inner race and it is going to pull it out, damaging your bearing. So we're going to use this small one on the rear, and then that second small one, I'm going to reverse it because they're getting bent. Then we're going to need more length, obviously. So go ahead and spin this out until you can get enough to reach the end of the hub. That's ample. I'm going to go in a little bit more. We're going to try it right there. So we're going to use this one and then one of the small ones. Now you want to get this as straight as possible, line it up. That's usually what helps it go in on the first shot. Eyeball it and try to get it as straight as possible. I guess that might be right about there. And then give it a shot. See if you can get it on. You can usually tell, it'll kind of bottom itself out and stop. And that'll be it. That hub is now on there. In case you're wondering, I did remove the dust cover and we're not going to leave them back on. I talked to the owner. They're a little bit rough and I think it looks cleaner without. I have them off of all of my cars as well, and we decided to leave them off his car also. And that'll be it for the front suspension components. Installation is kind of the reverse of removal. I would start with the lower control arm and then get the knuckle onto the ball joints and then put the upper control arm and then bolt everything up. Here I have everything put back together. One last tip before putting the car back onto the ground. Make sure the two bolts which go through the control arm, make sure you leave about 1 millimeter of space between the bolt head and the bushing. That way when we have the car settled onto the ground, we can tighten it then. We don't want to put any premature stress on that rubber bushing. That's how you wear them out quicker than normal. So make sure you leave a little bit of room there, get the wheel put back onto the car, and we're going to do this wheel spindle nut last. Another tip, some people don't like to use the rotor screws. It's completely optional. Once you put your wheel on, tighten it up, it's going to hold it flush to where it needs to be. Abe provided me with a brand new set of them, so we went ahead and we're utilizing them on his rotors. Now after getting the wheel spindle nut tightened, I went ahead and re-lifted the car, put it back onto jack stands, and I notched the CV axle nut. It's good to do that because I have seen them back themselves loose before, and if that happens, you can wear out your bearing very quickly and it'll just be unsafe to drive. So if you have someone else with you, you could have them press on the brakes, while you go ahead and spin it and torque it to 150 foot-pounds of torque, and then notch it. But I didn't have anyone else around, so put the wheel on, torqued it, lifted it back up, notched it. And that'll be it for today, guys. Hope you enjoy the video. We'll talk to you next time.